Oscar Wilde once said the best way to appreciate your job is to imagine yourself without one. But if you don't need to imagine being out of work, then we are here for you tonight. Welcome again to Talk Ottawa, and get ready to share your thoughts about what to do when you've been laid off. Yes, it's been 7 years since the high-tech meltdown here in Ottawa, but at the end of the day, there's no more job security now than there was then. Even this past December, a time of record low unemployment in the capital region, 2,700 jobs still disappeared. And all those workers now face a new year looking for new work. The question is, how do you do it right? How do you excel at the job of looking for a job? And should you even be looking for a job like the one you left? Tough decisions at a tough time in anyone's life, and we happily have some expert guests to help you navigate the stormy seas of unemployment. Joining us tonight are, on my left, Lee Wallace, who is from Caputo Consulting and co-author of a book that we'll get to in a moment. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Anita Caputo of the Big Picture Institute, who is also co-author of this book, which is called Learning to Bounce, From High-Tech Layoff to Your Ideal Work. Now, I know that the title is From a High-Tech Layoff, but the lessons, we should get this out of the way immediately. The lessons that you have in this book, Learning to Bounce, are not confined to the high-tech sector.
No.
Is that fair?
No, not at all.
Okay.
This is relevant for anybody and everybody.
And are there any specifics in this that somebody with a past at Nortel or JDS Uniphase would be looking for in this book? Or is that just your point of jumping off and that everything's pretty much universal?
Oh, it really is our point of jumping off. But
Yeah.
I think anyone who's worked in high tech will recognize the foundation that we set in the setting. We describe what it was like during the high tech boom.
Right.
You know, the excitement and the stocks going up and up, and you know, feeling like we were inevitable, feeling like nothing was ever going to end
Right.
in terms of prosperity. And so anyone who reads the book, you know, will be able to relate to that environment, and then to how it changed so suddenly, and how all of a sudden, you know, the revenue forecasts weren't meeting the targets. And I think they got to a point where they didn't want to give revenue forecasts anymore.
Right.
And John Roth, I think, at Nortel got himself in a bit of trouble at that time.
Yes, indeed he did. Now, before we get into discussing the book and discussing Learning to Bounce, which is the essence of the exercise, if you could just tell us something about what it is that you do. You're from the Big Picture Institute, but what is that, and what is the focus here?
Okay, so I'm a professional speaker, and what I specialize in today is management training. I do a lot of management training. I speak at conferences. I can do a lunch and learn, dinner engagement. And the topics that I speak on are management excellence. Effectiveness in the workplace would be my key
Right.
you know, target in terms of topic.
And in this case, effectiveness on getting back into the workplace. Now, Lee, you're from Caputo Consulting. As a matter of fact, you are a Caputo consultant.
I am Ascendo Consulting.
Is it Ascendo or
Ascendo.
Ascendo?
Well, it could be either, probably. But
Well, Ascend actually sounds much
Yes.
more uplifting. Now, what is that about? If you could give us some background on that.
what I do is I'm a coach, mostly, although I speak and I train and I write and all those things. But my job is to help people move from where they are to where they want to be. Wherever that is. So a lot of that is career in the broad sense, and that means not just your work, but whatever is going on within your life, and for people who are in work situations who want to get better and move on to where they want to be.
Right.
All of that. So I work with people to move them forward.
Now, you two have been working together in co-authoring the book Learning to Bounce. And by the way, you can find out more about Learning to Bounce by clicking on Learn to Bounce.
It is Learn to Bounce.
You can find out more about Learn to Bounce by clicking on learntobounce.com. That is learntobounce.com. We'd love to have your calls. If you could tell us something about your experiences being laid off and finding new work, if you're in the middle of the process, or if you're working right now but you'd like to have something in your quiver to support you in tougher times, then this is the time to give us a call. The number is 728-1001. That is 728-1001 here on Talk Ottawa. By the way, we will be giving away a copy of Learn to Bounce at the end of the program. So just give us a call, get your name on the list, and we'll announce the person who won the book at the end of the show. Now, Learn to Bounce, the title I think is pretty much self-explanatory, and certainly anybody who lives in the capital region has either been laid off or knows somebody who has. Just that one sector alone was responsible for so many job losses that it is a story that everybody is part of in this town. But if you could tell us, first of all, about the book, its inception, why you decided to write it and how you two got together to do it.
Okay, so it starts with me. I was laid off from the high-tech industry, and when I was laid off...
Would you mind telling us which one?
Oh, sure, I was laid off from Nortel.
Okay, well, that fits.
And it was summer of 2001, and right from the time I was laid off, I just felt that this was a great opportunity to do what I always wanted to do. Now, it's not to say that it wasn't difficult. I mean, the tears were there and it was sad, and I always say leaving the workplace was like leaving my other family, you know, because that's where you spent your days and that's what you knew. But on the other hand, there was an opportunity to start over again. And I needed to know what I wanted to do. So I was doing my internet search and I found a book called Finding Your Perfect Work by Paul and Sarah Edwards. And they licensed me to actually deliver their workshop. And in delivering their workshop and in pursuing a career as a professional speaker, people love to hear stories. And I thought, oh, I hear so many stories and I really need to document them just to remember them. And it was in that idea of documenting the stories that I was hearing that I thought, well, if I'm going to go through the trouble of documenting them, I might as well put them in a book. And I ended up telling a couple people of my intention. And interestingly, Janice Kelnan, who is the author of Shift, knew that I knew Lee, and she says, oh, you really need to connect with Lee. And 2 weeks later, I'm at a networking event, and I meet a woman, never met her in my life before. And I'm telling her about my idea, and she says, do you know Lee Wallace? She says, you really need to connect with Lee Wallace. So, you know, they say there is no coincidence. And I contacted Lee, and we met, and we decided to move forward. And Lee can tell you a little more about himself. He's actually authored a book on career studies that's used in high schools today. And so we saw Lee as that career expert, the writer, and I saw myself as the orchestrator and the person with all the connections within high tech, etc.
So a match made in heaven, but to pick up the story, your interest in managing careers and managing career comebacks comes from where?
It probably starts with me. I was one of those people who, when in high school, thought he knew exactly what he was going to do for the rest of his life. And turned out I wasn't right. First year university was a bit of a surprise, learning about what I could and couldn't do and what the world was like out there. And so I did a major turn from aeronautical engineering, where I thought I was going. I ended up with a degree in history and have a master's in counseling. So those kinds of things happen, and it was a blessing. And so I've always been fascinated by people's career paths. I worked with high school students for a long time. I was a high school guidance counselor. And students have a tendency to believe that by the time they finish high school, they should know where they go. And they either lock in on that and say, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I've got the answer to that dreaded question about what are you going to do. Whereas other people get paralyzed because they don't know, and so they don't talk to me about it. So what I did was I started collecting my own stories, and that's partly why we were connected. I was interviewing people just for the heck of it. I didn't have any particular idea in mind other than I had worked a lot with people who thought you needed to know, whereas the reality is people's career paths go like this. They wander, and things happen. Sometimes it's their choice, and sometimes it's not their choice. So the whole thing around layoff is only a part of that process. How is it that people decide what they're going to do and move forward in their lives? And usually when there's a setback, it's not necessarily a setback.
And by the way, while we're on that subject, why did you choose the format? The book amounts to a series of personal histories, testimonials, confessions, whatever you want to call them. Why that particular format? Why did you decide to go that route?
Really, the power is in the stories. The stories are very powerful. It's about people overcoming adversity. Change was imposed on these people.